Welcome to Preventing People Problems, a podcast brought to you by the HR department. Maybe you have an employee who's stolen something from the office, misused your data, or they're consistently late. Today we'll be talking about how to deal with a disciplinary hearing, what needs to be considered, and the process you should follow. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Preventing People Problems brought to you by the HR department. I'm Tracey Hudson and today I'm with Parmilla Minhas and Erica Burke. Hello.
Hi.
So let's do the important bits first. Let's introduce you both. So Erica, tell everyone about yourself.
Okay, so I'm with the HR department Solihull.
Yeah.
I've been with the HR department for now 4.5 years. So that's been great. And before that, I was a consultant. So commuting to London every day, sorting problems out with lots of different companies.
Amazing.
So yeah, great move.
Amazing. And Parmilla, hi.
Hi, so I'm with the HR department, Watford, West Herts and South Bedfordshire. And I've been with them for 7 years now. And before that, I had the life of a corporate HR person, so specialising in professional services and financial services.
Brilliant. Mm-hmm. Okay, so today I'm really excited because we're going to be talking about investigations and disciplinaries. So for all our small business owners who are listening, what they really want to know is, what do you do when something happens? Yeah. Like maybe someone's behaved in a way that they shouldn't have done, or they've upset a client, or something's happened. What do you do in that moment? Parmilla.
Okay, so I think the most important thing is to do a fact find. So what exactly has happened? Let's look at the facts. Let's understand what the misconduct is, if there is any misconduct. So that could be meeting with the employee in question. It could be trying to understand if there are other people that might have witnessed the alleged misconduct, misbehaviour, whatever it might be, and trying to ascertain exactly what has happened and almost build like a timeline of events of what's taken place. That will help you, I guess, understand how serious the issue is. That will inform you on what's next steps, what do we need to do going forward.
And who does that? What are the rules around who needs to do that investigation?
So I think it's tough, isn't it, with small businesses, because they don't have this huge resource issue.
No, and sometimes, there's that temptation just to sort of leap right in.
Yeah.
And, they don't have lots of different managers they can turn to. They perhaps don't even know, what process to follow. If you've not got a policy, you've not done it before, it's quite a thing. And some people will think they can just launch straight in and, sort it all out and find out later that they've not done it right. But yeah, so when it's, who does it? Sometimes it's, the manager there.
The line manager,
or do they just take stock and then find out who else is available to help with that? It's a difficult one, if you're small, it's often better to get somebody else to help if you possibly can, at least at that start point, just to get a bit of advice about what you do.
Yeah, where do we start?
Because it's so easy in a small business to make so many assumptions, isn't it?
100%.
Because you know those people. Yeah. So, I mean, if anything happened in my team, I know that would really upset me, because I think, how could they do that to me? Yeah. Why would they do that? They know better. Yeah. It's so personal.
So, that's so true. I think quite often we see that when we're talking to business owners, that they do exactly that, going, I don't understand. They're not usually like that. They wouldn't usually do that. That's not typical behaviour. And actually I think that's really important to understand, that is to then go, okay, well, if that is how you think that they wouldn't usually behave, why are they behaving in that way? Trying to understand, isn't it? Yeah. Trying to unpick, why has that particular thing, whatever it might be, why has that taken place? If you are emotionally invested in it, I think it's better to stand back and go, actually, do you know what? I'm probably not the best person to do this. Perhaps my equal, my line manager that's over there, perhaps he or she or they might be better equipped to deal with this because they're not so emotionally invested here.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when they are very emotionally invested, particularly with, it's a small team, there is a tendency sometimes to, either be too nice, or go too far the other way, depending on your personal experience of those individuals. And quite often, because it's a small business, you've seen people at their best and at their worst.
Yeah.
And you can very easily sort of jump to conclusions about what has motivated it, what it is, and that can sometimes get you into hot water. So I think, you know, there is that bit that just pause. Yeah. What is it that's happened? How bad is it? You know, is it a one-off? Is it not? Just pause for a second, because it is really easy just to launch into something and say, because you know them, you know, make lots of assumptions that may come back to bite you.
Yeah.
And when it's something really serious, or I guess, you know, a manager or a business owner has taken it really personally, their instinct is, I just want them out of here.
Yeah.
Just get them out. I just want them out.
Yep.
I can't bear to look at them.
Yep.
It's like when you're angry with your kids. Just go to your room and think about what you've done.
Want them gone.
Get them out.
Get them out.
So, can we talk about suspension and when that's appropriate and when it's not? Erica?
Yeah, I mean, suspension is you know, we often talk about it being in terms of when it's the most serious of things. So when we think it's something, you know, that's theft, there's been a punch up, you know, something that could potentially be a gross misconduct issue, then that's perhaps when you'd think about suspending them whilst you look into it. There is a temptation for people to do it, automatically suspend people and suspend them indefinitely. I've been in some places where people have been suspended for a year or more.
Mm-hmm. On full pay?
On full pay, amazingly. Because they haven't just, you know, the case has become convoluted, it's not been structured, and they don't quite know how to deal with the facts that are emerging. So people have been left languishing, and that's a really dangerous place, you know, both financially for the business, 100%. But also in terms of if suspension is supposed to be something that is a neutral act, and you kept somebody away from the office or from whatever work they're doing, they're not getting the development, you know, they're effectively being punished, and they haven't actually done anything yet.
Yeah.
Or not been proven.
Yeah. I think that's really important, the time frame, because, you know, we've had instances similar to you where the individual's been suspended at the drop of a hat, and then they've just gone out, and 2 months later nothing has happened, and they're continuing to be paid. But more than the financial thing, it's the impact to that individual of being out of the business for 2 months, not knowing what's happened. And also their colleagues. Yeah. You know, their colleagues have been, hold on, that person's been suspended, where are they, what's going on? And obviously you can't give the details. So I think that it's really important that managers, business owners don't take that knee-jerk reaction and go, I'm so cross, I just need to get them out of the business. Actually, what is the severity of what they've done? Is there a risk to the business? Because ultimately, I think that's where suspension is. If there's a high risk, then it's appropriate. Because
sometimes people can move to, you know, be moved to other work. It's not people's preferred option. But if you're looking at it, if the case went to, you know, the extreme, as in ended up in a tribunal situation, they would be looking about how reasonable you were in that, and was suspension the right thing to do under those circumstances? Did you actually consider anything else? So I think, you know, it is important why we need to suspend, but it may not always be the best thing. But certainly in terms of things of, you know, the most serious of issues, and you're worried particularly if they've got access to information, they could absolutely they could try to talk to other members of staff,
influence what
witnesses
say.
Absolutely. You know, I had one actually the other day. Somebody phoned me up for this reason, and the managing director, because the person was known to them, you know, he then wanted to have a chat with the person. They've already been suspended. You know, he's wanted to have an informal chat. They're doing an investigation at the same time that he's not doing. And, you know, it was kind of, they were kind of stuck as to what they do now, because they were in this place where they hadn't moved forward, but they don't want to do anything bad. They want to make sure she's all right.
It's a really tough one, isn't it?
It was really difficult, and I had to kind of say to them, just step back a minute and think about what process we're following. What are you trying? What stage are you at? What are you trying to do? Let's get it, you know, be clear about where we are at any point in this, and not just keep them hanging on, because they didn't know what was going on. They were like, I've been suspended. I don't know what's happening. Haven't heard anything.
Had no
don't know what's going on.
And that's the important thing, isn't it? Is to maintain that line of communication with an individual whilst they are suspended. Okay, this is what we're doing right now. this is the next step.
Yeah.
This is where we are in terms of time frame as well.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it should be treated with the utmost importance.
Just keep them in the loop, just to say, you know it's a serious matter, but it is that sort of, you know, if it's going to be at last a couple of weeks to do an investigation, then just say, look, either it's taken a little bit longer than we'd originally anticipated, you know, so it'll be a little while longer, but we will, once we've got that, we'll decide what the next steps are and whether we need to speak to you again or what have you.
Yeah.
I guess it's that sense of urgency, isn't it? You need to just be making sure that the person who's suspended understands that this is important to you, it's priority, and you're doing it as quickly as you can.
And things are moving, because again, when people are out of the business, you're losing productivity. Other people, as you said, Parmilla, are wondering what on earth's going on. It's difficult to keep it secret. The rumours start. So actually, making time to move things forward is really important, because you know, I don't know about yourselves, but I've come across managers who, you know, when we've done the suspension and then we're trying to investigate, they've never got time.
No.
They're busy,
It's not
they
a
haven't done it, it's not a priority, the person's out of the business, they've forgotten about them, they've got their day job to do, and all the while, other people are wondering, work's not getting done, you've got somebody off who's being paid and not delivering, and in a small team you can't afford that. You have to be able to move quickly.
Yeah. And can we talk a bit about the team themselves? So you've got a team, you've got to keep the process confidential, but you've got a team of people here who are going, where's Joe? When's he coming back? What's happening? Why is he off? And how, you know, that is really hard, and I know business owners struggle with that. How do you maintain the confidentiality of the person involved but stop the gossip? And that kind of communication with what you're saying to the team, because the person who's suspended, if they come back and nothing's happened and they're cleared of any wrongdoing at all, they've got to walk back through the doors, go back and sit at their desk or go back to their workstation and just carry on.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, isn't it? And it is one that you're absolutely right. Managers and business owners will say, well, can I just tell them that they're going through a process? Or can I just say something? And
process.
A process, yeah. And I always say to managers or business owners, actually saying that you're going through a process, you're pretty much telling them what's happening. So can we try and say, you know, they're taking some time out of the business, you know, it's a personal issue, whatever it might be, because you can't give in to all of the gossip and say, well, I just want to shut it down, so I'm just going to tell them what's happening. Well, actually no, because you're kind of you're releasing his or hers or their confidential data by telling somebody that they're going through this process. And also I think it comes back to this whole, you know, people have this, there's no smoke without fire, right? So if someone's going through a disciplinary process, well, they've obviously done it.
Done something.
They've done something.
Yeah.
I mean, life in, you know, we're all people, we're all interested and curious and, you know, nosy, you know, so, you know, we have to kind of be as realistic as we can, because depending on what the issue was, I mean, if somebody punched somebody else in the face and then, you know, they're off the premises, then pretty much everybody knows. Pretty much everybody
Can't hide that one.
Absolutely, pretty much people know what's going on. And then, you know, so you've got a situation exactly as you've described, where you might feel that you need to say, look, you know, they've taken a bit of personal time off, they'll be away for a couple of weeks. Any queries, put them through to myself. You know, they may be able to deal with queries, but just for the moment, we'll just leave them alone, Or it may be that you have to shut it down because it is well known. And you'll say, look, we are looking into it. Can you know, this is very confidential. Can you please not discuss it? So you might have to come out to, you know, if it's obvious. You know, I mean, I was in one place and they called them the disappeareds. Because, you know, they'd gone and, you know, and sometimes they never came back that people saw. And actually that's stirred a whole set of other things. So, you know, there is a bit about, you know, thinking about what your internal communications are depending on what the nature of the issue is, really.
And Erica, before you mentioned gross misconduct. So can you explain that?
Gross misconduct. Okay, so that's where somebody really has done something that's undermined your relationship. I mean, that's kind of the HRE sort of terms. But really, you know, if somebody's you know, downloading indecent images, they're, you know, seriously bullying members of staff. You know, they've stolen something. These are things that, you know, mean that you can't necessarily trust that individual to behave in a way that's acceptable. both for your business reputation, but also to protect other colleagues. So it's that fundamental breach of your relationship. You know, and the list is sort of endless because every business is different.
Depends,
And, you know, what might be okay and acceptable, there were inverted commas, in some places may not be in others.
Yeah.
You know, you might give somebody the benefit of the doubt in a situation of, I mean, it's not always not typical that one would in a situation of theft, but you don't know. In certain business, but particularly if, you know, if your bit of it is managing the money.
Yeah, it depends on your role,
Absolutely.
doesn't it?
I mean, if it's, you know, somebody might be, I don't know, I'm not, you know, if they've, you know, a ticket, a timekeeping ticket or a receipt that they've not sent through or something, you know, in time, or they've tried to, it depends, you know, I mean, there's sort of mitigation and grey areas, but yeah, it's those things that are really sort of the most serious things that somebody could do in your business.
But if they're not really serious, you can still do something about it. You can still go through a disciplinary process.
Yeah.
Right, Parmilla?
Yeah. So you know, the gross misconduct is obviously the most extreme. So your theft, your fighting, your harassment, your bullying, etc. But there could be some things that are around persistent behaviour.
Yes.
So, you know, you could have persistent lateness, for example, and that's something that I think we see very, very often in small businesses. Oh, it's only 5 minutes, it's only 10 minutes. And then when it's going on over a really prolonged period of time, business owner will call you and go, actually, I can't put up with this anymore, they've got to go. Actually, even with the kind of smaller instances of misconduct, nip them in the bud at the earliest possible opportunity. It doesn't always have to be disciplinary. It could just be, we need to have a really strong conversation.
Yeah, bit of standard setting.
It's about maintaining your standards.
Yeah, because sometimes people, you know, will come in, they pick up a culture, and that culture may appear to be very laid back.
Yeah.
They might see other people come in a bit later, and they think it's not really that big a deal if I come in a bit late. You know, you're overreacting. And again, it depends, you know, you have to set the tone organisationally.
Yeah.
And if people have misunderstood or, you know, or are misrepresenting your culture, then that's the bit where you say, look, you know, I don't quite know where you got this idea, but let's just be clear. You need to be ready for work at 9 o'clock at your desk, not eating your breakfast, not walking through,
getting a coffee.
You know, from 9 o'clock. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's when, you know, if managers are inconsistent in how they address those things, that's when you perhaps have some problems, because you might have somebody who you can see on the phone, it bothers you. It bothers you because you don't like them. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't bother you because it's detracting necessarily from their work. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it's because that person really irritates you, and you can see them on their phone and they're not working hard, and that becomes your driver.
They came in at 3 minutes past 9.
Absolutely. And somebody else did, and they say, I'm sorry, I missed the bus. Okay, well, you know, she missed the bus.
Never mind.
Yeah, but the other one, well, you should have got up earlier.
Yeah.
So it's about, you know, managing those things, because, again, being consistent, because when you're inconsistent, you then open yourselves up for other challenges, which you really don't want to start considering.
It's tough though, isn't it? Because you have to remember that we're all still people, and we have our emotions, and you do feel more cross with some people than others. But as you know, as managers, as business owners, it's important to really try and almost control that.
Absolutely.
And I guess, you know, I don't know about you, but I've had multiple conversations with managers going, is it actually the person that's annoying you, or is it the action that they're doing? How long have they been doing this for? Does anyone else do the same thing? How do you react in those situations? And kind of, you almost sense checking with that manager to then say, actually, probably am being a bit.
And that's the sort of advice I often give, is that, you know, when somebody does that kind of complaint, I say, okay, you know, are they the only person? Not that it always makes it, but are they the only person who does that? You know, what's the general understanding? Is it the individual? Is it, you know, a real rule, or is it just you're upset by them? Back to consistency, you know.
So moving on to the hearing itself. Yes. So you've done your investigation. There's some allegations there that need some answers. How do you approach the hearing? What do you need to do in terms of a process? Parmilla?
So you've done your investigation. So the investigating manager has made the recommendation. It's got to go to disciplinary. So the individual needs to be invited to a disciplinary with a formal letter. They need to be given a reasonable amount of notice for that hearing.
What's reasonable?
And that's a really good question, because we hear so much around 48 hours, but I think you've got to take into consideration what the allegation is. If it's something really straightforward, of course 48 hours is more than enough. But if you've got a really serious gross misconduct, fraud, theft, whatever it is, there should be a lot of documentation that you're providing to the employee. That might take them longer than 48 hours to go through.
And you've got to be, there's still a sense of fairness and proportionateness. So, if somebody's got to say, you've done a big investigation, disciplinaries, stand and fall quite often on the quality of that investigation.
Yeah.
And then making sure that at the hearing people are properly prepared to be able to represent themselves. So, yes, you want to move it through very quickly, and, exactly as you say, depending on the circumstances, 24, 48 hours may be fine. But actually, if somebody's got to find themselves somebody to accompany them, you've got to be able to do that. If somebody says that they can't attend, ACAS would also advise that you reschedule at least once.
Yeah.
It's just about showing that you have behaved reasonably. Whether you believe the individual and what they're saying is neither here nor there in some of this. This is about you behaving reasonably and giving them a reasonable opportunity to defend themselves, if you like, and make representation about the allegations. And just on that point quickly, the allegations, be very clear about what it is that you're holding them to.
Yeah.
Because if you're alleging one thing and something else comes out and that's what you then, sanction them on,
you haven't given them the opportunity.
No, it's not the right. The two don't match. It's got to be the right.
Critical.
It's critical. You've got to get the allegation absolutely clear that on this date you breached our da-da-da-da.
But I think with that has got to go all of the information that the investigating manager has used to make that decision to go disciplinary or not. And so the investigation report is critical. That's got to be detailed. That's got to have all the evidence, and that has got to be shared with the employee.
Yes, they've got to. Anything that you're relying on as the person who's hearing, and we've said already, it's got to be a different person who's investigated versus who's going to be managing the hearing. Having somebody else there to take notes. I think, you've got to be able to give that person all the information that you're using. They have to have access to the same information, so that A, they can properly represent themselves, and B, if you need to ask actual questions, to clear up a point that you're not understanding about something they've said, then again you're using the same information, and it's fair.
And I think the other point that business owners or investigator managers or whoever forget is to let the witnesses know that their statements will be shared with the
100%.
person.
Yeah.
The old, I want to say something, but I don't want anyone to see it's me that said it.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That is really key.
Yeah.
So, Erica, you mentioned a representative. Now, small businesses don't recognise trade unions.
That's right, yeah.
But they can still have a trade union rep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And some people have struggled with that.
Yeah.
But, if somebody wants a trade union present, they have the right to contact absolutely whoever they want. I mean, they can't have, solicitors and all the rest of it, unless that's something in your policy.
Family friend.
Yeah. But again, if there's an issue of reasonable adjustment, if it's somebody, you may exceptionally, it's not something that I'd recommend as part, as normal.
Yeah.
But if somebody doesn't feel capable of representing themselves in a particular situation, and it may be for their health reasons or personal reasons that they don't have any, it's not appropriate to have somebody else who's in the business, then you might consider whether somebody other than a colleague or a friend or a trade union representative can accompany. You're not obliged to, but it's one of these things. It's about how reasonable you are.
And I guess
these
in
things.
terms of adjustments, going through a process like this is really stressful.
100%.
And quite often employees will go off sick.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't have to do the hearing in person if that's going to put too much pressure on the people, right? You can do it in other ways.
Yeah.
Camilla?
You can. And I think the other thing is that if somebody has gone off with stress, because that's the typical one you see, and they're citing the hearing is in itself a reason that they're off, then actually expediting that process will help with their mental health. And bringing along a family member may absolutely help them in that process. But it's important in the hearing that the hearing manager makes it very, very clear what that role is.
And I think, and that you have that situation also where somebody might raise a grievance during that process. So again, it's do you halt things while you look into that matter? Do you say, okay, well actually we don't feel it's the two things aren't particularly linked at this point, so we're going to proceed. These things do crop up in terms of say people go off sick, I can't attend, so could they do a written representation through their trade union? It's important to keep it moving if you possibly can. If it's reasonable to hold it up for a week or so, under the circumstance you consider that, but actually you need to keep it moving, because sometimes some individuals will just not want to face it.
The longer it goes on, it adds to stress.
Absolutely, you need to keep things moving.
And this is why it's so important to be calling somebody like you guys, because this is where the real value of good HR advice is, isn't it? To make sure it keeps moving, because a small business owner might get a grievance about the process and absolutely freeze. Oh, I don't know what to do. Let's just
and they'll just
run away
stand
from
back.
this for a while. And not take any action.
Or even they'll get a doctor's note and they'll say, oh, we've got doctor's note and we can't possibly
can't
contact that person, we can't do anything. And then before you know it, 4-6 weeks and the process is totally halted.
It's so unsettling for everybody else in the business, because they don't know if this
they don't know what's going
back.
on, and one of the things I do say is, it's about taking control of that situation. Don't let the employee be the one that takes control. You are managing, you are owning this process, you're the business owner, you are owning this, you have the right to manage it in a way that you see fit. And as long as you're within the law, being fair and reasonable, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing it. People will sometimes try to throw all manner of stones at you to deflect,
but it's about having the knowledge though, isn't it?
And
to
confidence.
Say, actually, can I push that back? And a lot of business owners don't know that.
No. And those are the conversations that, excuse me, that I've had with my clients. I say, look, don't panic. It's not up to them. You personally have to manage this complaint. Both for your business and for your employees and everybody else, you've got to do it. You can listen to what they have to say, but actually in this process, they'll have their moment. Their moment is at the investigation interview, and it'll be at the disciplinary hearing. Everything else, you're in charge.
And in terms of the communicating the decision, so they're in the hearing, they've talked through the evidence, they've got it in their mind what they're thinking about doing.
Adjourn.
And that's the one thing that we always say to clients is don't issue the decision there and then. Because all that demonstrates is that everything they've said in that meeting, every representation they've made, you haven't given any due consideration to, and you've gone in with a predetermined decision.
You've made your mind up.
You've already made your mind up. And actually, it can happen that somebody might bring up an important, valid point in that hearing that you do need to look into.
And it could be about the investigation. Yes, once you've kind of reached an end or reached a point where you feel that you've asked the questions, you now want to reflect on everything that you've heard, there may be something that's come up in there that you say, do you know what, actually they raised a point, I didn't want to raise it in the meeting, but they've raised a point that I think we need to, there's a gap there in that investigation. I think we need to adjourn to get further information, or adjourn just to consider the outcome and what possible sanction you might give, because again, what has been the previous form, if there's been previous form either for the individual or for others in a similar situation, do you have what feels reasonable? So I think having that time, the person can still be waiting, go and have a cup of coffee or whatever they're doing, but adjourn definitely just take stock before you go back and communicate what happens next.
So you've got to do that in writing. They've got the right to appeal. If you've given a warning or you've dismissed them, they're not going to like it.
No.
So how do they appeal? What does that process look like, and who does that?
So you would usually, which is very difficult in small businesses, totally get. So you would have a different person hearing the appeal versus the disciplinary manager, because you need this whole, impartiality. They've really given due consideration. So the employee's got to put their appeal in writing, and they've got to state their reasons for appeal. It can't just be, I just don't like the decision. I just don't agree with it. There's got to be grounds as to why they feel like a piece of evidence wasn't considered. They feel like there's new facts that weren't taken into consideration. Anything that's considered reasonable grounds.
And sometimes, again, depending on the individual and their experience of, being in business or being in trouble, they don't kind of know what are grounds of appeal. I don't know what that means. We know because it's the language that we live with. But actually, for somebody who gets that letter and they don't really understand, they just say, look, it's wrong. I'm not happy about it. I'm innocent. It's being able to help, explain that, clearly to them, so that actually, when it comes to hearing it, we don't focus on the wrong things. Because if somebody's said that it's because the decision, the penalty is unfairly harsh, I was very ill at the time, I was tired, I was distracted, and I think you didn't take that into consideration, then that's what you focus on. You don't focus on other things that you might have spotted that they didn't complain about. You focus on the thing that they're appealing against, because that's what their grounds of appeal are.
But on your point around they may not understand, it's really important that the outcome letter is very clear and very detailed as to why this certain decision was reached. Because sometimes they just don't understand why you got from A to B.
And that's why outcome letters are so long. I mean, we've done 13, 15 pages of outcome letters. Because you have to get it all in there. And it helps you in the long run, again, because you might see this again if it ever goes to tribunal, and it helps everybody understand. But also it might stop the person from feeling the need to appeal, because if actually they've properly understood what you've considered, in forming your judgment, that you've listened to what they've said about how stressed they were, but nevertheless they're an important role. We can't afford for these sorts of mistakes. It's not the first time it's happened. They can kind of understand. They might not like it, but they understand, and they then will not just appeal for the sake of appealing, which people often will do when they don't really have enough information to go on.
Absolutely, don't understand.
Well, thank you two so much. This has been really good. We've absolutely run out of time. We really need to talk about tribunals, and that's what I wanted to be able to do. So will you guys come back and talk about tribunals?
What do you think, Parmilla?
We'll do it. We'll come back.
We'll come back. Thank you, Tracey. That's lovely.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.